What would you do if someone who looked down on you suddenly dared you to achieve the impossible? Friends, wait until the end of this story, because you won't believe how one simple girl shocked the toughest soldier alive. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Goodness Corner so you never miss stories that touch your heart and open your eyes to the power of courage. She had always been invisible to most people, just another face in a world that valued noise over silence, but in the army base where she worked as a cleaner and occasional assistant in the weapons room, her hands knew more than the eyes of most soldiers, because while others carried rifles into battle, she carried them in pieces, polished, reassembled, and breathed life into them without ever firing a single round. Her name was Layla, and for years she had been mocked by men who saw her as nothing more than a caretaker of their weapons, a woman destined to sweep floors, clean barrels, and prepare coffee for the real warriors, yet none of them ever noticed the way her fingers moved with reverence across steel, or how her eyes caught the faintest scratches in a scope, or how her shoulders never trembled when a rifle's weight pressed against them. Layla came from a family that had been torn apart by war, her father a mechanic who taught her precision, her mother a teacher who taught her patience, and her brother a soldier who never came back home, and though her heart carried scars too heavy for words, she never allowed grief to crush her spirit. She had no medals, no uniform with stripes, and no rank to command respect, yet she carried something rarer, a quiet strength that waited, hidden, until life itself pushed her to reveal it. That day, as she polished a massive sniper rifle in the armory, the room fell silent when Captain Jace walked in, a special ops sniper whose name was whispered across the base like a legend. He was the man who could hit targets at impossible distances, the man who had rescued hostages in the desert with a single bullet, the man other soldiers saluted not just for his rank but for his fearlessness. He watched Layla work for a moment, his arms crossed, his sharp eyes narrowed as though he were trying to figure out why someone so ordinary could handle his weapon with such care. Then, with a half-smirk that carried both arrogance and curiosity, he said the words that would change her life forever, "You know how to clean it, but do you know how to use it? I bet you couldn't even see a target at 3,800 meters, let alone hit it." The soldiers nearby chuckled, some whispering bets about how fast Layla would blush, stutter, or retreat from such a challenge, but Layla did none of those things. She looked up, locked her calm eyes on Jace, and with a voice steady as stone replied, "Dare me." That single phrase spread through the armory like fire, turning laughter into stunned silence, for no one had ever dared to challenge the sniper who could silence a battlefield with one shot. Jace raised an eyebrow, half amused and half intrigued, and without waiting for her to back down, he motioned her to follow him to the training field. The air outside was sharp, carrying the bite of dust and wind as soldiers gathered around, eager to watch the humiliation of a woman who dared to step into a man's world. Layla walked with the rifle cradled in her arms, its weight balanced as naturally as if it had been a part of her since birth, while Jace set up the impossible shot, 3,800 meters away, a steel plate barely visible against the horizon, shimmering in the heat. "No rookie makes this shot," Jace warned, his voice laced with pride and the unspoken promise that he would enjoy watching her fail. "Even trained snipers miss it more often than not. Are you sure you want to embarrass yourself?" Layla laid down slowly, stretching out on the ground with the rifle, her cheek pressing against the stock, her hands adjusting the scope with a precision that made Jace pause for the first time. The soldiers muttered behind her, some laughing, others shaking their heads, but none could deny the steadiness of her posture, the way she controlled her breathing, the way silence seemed to wrap around her as though she had done this 1,000 times before. Her mind drifted back to her brother, who once showed her how to hold his hunting rifle before he left for war, telling her, "It's not about pulling the trigger, Layla, it's about knowing when the world is still enough to listen to your heartbeat." She carried those words now, inhaling deeply, letting the sounds of mockery fade into nothing, her eyes fixed on the target that seemed no larger than a speck of dust. The wind shifted, and she adjusted the scope, compensating with movements so subtle that even Jace recognized them as the instincts of someone who wasn't just guessing, she was reading the air like a language. "Whenever you're ready," Jace said, folding his arms, but something in his voice had changed, less mocking now, more watchful. Layla pressed her finger against the trigger, not rushing, not proving anything to the world but to herself, and in that eternal second, time froze. Then, she fired. The sound cracked through the field, soldiers shielding their ears, eyes following the distant horizon where the plate waited. For a long moment, nothing happened, and whispers rose, "She missed, of course she missed." But then, a faint ping echoed, carried back by the wind, the unmistakable sound of a bullet striking steel. The crowd gasped, jaws dropping, disbelief painted across every face as the dust shimmered around the plate, proof that the impossible had just been done by a woman no one believed in. Layla did not smile, did not boast, she simply lifted her head, her calm gaze meeting Jace's. The captain's smirk had vanished, replaced by something she had never seen before in the eyes of a man who feared nothing, respect. But Jace was not one to yield so easily, not a man who lived his life proving he was the best. He crouched down beside her, his voice low enough for only her to hear, "That wasn't luck. Tell me where you learned that." Layla glanced at him, her voice quiet yet firm, "You don't need a battlefield to learn patience, Captain. Sometimes, grief teaches you more than war ever will." Jace said nothing for a moment, his eyes searching hers, and for the first time he wondered who Layla really was beneath the silence, the woman who could match a sniper at his own game. The soldiers began to cheer, some even clapping, though a few still shook their heads in denial, but the truth was undeniable, Layla had done what they could not. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the training ground, Layla stood up, brushing dust from her uniform as though nothing remarkable had happened. Jace followed, still watching her with an intensity that unsettled even him, because he realized she had just shaken the foundation of everything he believed about skill, about strength, about who belonged on the battlefield. For Layla, it wasn't about glory or recognition, it was about proving to herself that the world had been wrong to keep her in the shadows, and though she walked away quietly, her footsteps carried the weight of someone who had just taken the first step into a destiny far larger than she imagined. And as you're listening to this story right now, dear friends, ask yourself, what hidden strength lies within you, waiting for the moment to rise? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Goodness Corner for more stories that remind you that greatness can come from the most unexpected hearts.